Welcome to Reaching Abundance. I'm Virginia Elder, your host. This is the podcast where you get weekly cliff notes on developing mental fortitude and podcast marketing strategies from top business owners. Ready to level up your show? Start by booking a call with me using the link in the episode description. Let's get into the episode. Today, you get to meet Bri Conn, co-host of the Childfree Wealth podcast. I'm particularly excited for you to hear about their very clear niche, their workflow for the show now with over 120 episodes published, and their journey to get there. Bri and Jay and the Childfree Wealth brand is all about helping people who do not have kids and do not plan to have kids enjoy their time, money, and freedom in a way that supports their goals and dreams, which is a vastly different financial plan than what I, for example, and our family of four would need. What I want you to take away from this conversation is the power of niching down. Their brand and podcast is attracting clients like wild because they're so clear about who they serve. As you listen to my conversation with Bri today, ask yourself, how can I niche down further with my messaging? Bri, welcome to Reaching Abundance. I am so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me today. I'm very excited to be here and have this conversation with you.
I want to give you the opportunity right off the bat to just share about the brand you represent and the podcast. Give us the high level of what you do and about your business.
Yeah, I work with Childfree Wealth. We are a life and financial planning firm for people who do not have kids and do not intend on having kids. So our entire job is working with dinks and sinks, so single income, no kids, and dual income, no kids. We really focus on not only the financial part of everything, because we are finance people, but also the life part too. And that's why we say we do life and financial planning. Our goal is really to make our clients' finances simple so that their life can be amazing, because we want you to go out and do things you enjoy and have the freedom and flexibility to do that without worrying about whether or not your finances can support that. The whole point for us is let's figure out what your life looks like, and then what do we need to do to set your finances up to support you in that.
So tell me a little bit about the path from, okay, we're doing life planning, financial planning. This is an area where we're passionate about, and we see a need in the market for it because a lot of information out there is targeted toward families, parents, kind of like your traditional family makeup. And yet I have plenty of friends and connections who don't have kids, won't have kids, don't want kids. And yeah, it totally makes sense that their financial plan is probably drastically different than mine. Talk to me a little bit about, when did this become apparent? This is the rabbit hole we need to dive down into, and this is our niche.
So Dr. Jay founded it, and then I joined back in April of 2023. When he was going through the CFP, Certified Financial Planner courses, he said, I never saw anything about people who didn't have kids in there. It was always empty nesters, or you're planning for college, all of these different things for your kids. And he goes, that didn't fit me in my life. Then I was going through and deciding, I want to become a CFP. And I connected with him online. We actually met in a Facebook group for people who don't have kids.
Perfect.
And aren't planning on having kids. Yeah. I didn't make the post, but I had commented on a couple posts. And one said, what do you do now? And the other one said, what do you want to do? And I commented on both of them. He saw my answers and said, hey, I'm a CFP. If you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'd love to pass your contact information on to people who I know that need marketing, because I was in marketing before. I was talking to him. We met for the first time. We were supposed to talk for 30 minutes, ended up being 2 hours. Happened again, same scenario. We met. It was supposed to be a short while. It was another 2-hour conversation. And I just said, can I have a job? And there was not a job at that point. It was him. As I was talking to him and as we were having a conversation, it was very clear that this was something I hadn't thought about before, but was so necessary. And since then, the past 2 years, we've just really been diving deeper and deeper and really going and focusing on people who don't have kids and aren't planning on having kids. And it's so, I think, ingrained into me to just automatically be like, yep, nope, no kids. That the other day I was reviewing something and they said, yeah, I have kids. And I was like, oh, wait, what? Like, this is not who I planned for.
Who are you?
Whoa. Yeah, exactly. And I was like, okay, well, I know how you got here, but that was not something that I had anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so incredibly different because one of the first questions we'll often ask our clients is, do you care about how much money you leave behind when you die?
Mm-hmm.
And so many of them say, no, I don't. I don't have anyone to leave it to necessarily.
Yeah.
So no, when you're in that situation, you don't need to build a big nest egg to pass on to anybody. So you can make different choices throughout your life.
Yeah. Yeah. As financial advisors, planners, other financial professionals are listening, I'm sure they're thinking, oh my gosh, this is like a dream come true to stumble upon a former marketing person who now wants to get into financial planning and join my firm. I mean, what a dream come true for Jay and this like perfect partnership that's forming because I'm seeing that, I'm sure your desire for the planning piece, but also your marketing background has a lot to do with, hey, let's lean into this. So, what did those conversations look like?
Yeah, it really was kind of a symbiotic relationship in the sense that he had the CFP that I needed to work with him. And then also, I'm just about close to the finish line in my CFP. All the hard stuff is done. It's just finish the experience hours and then submit everything. So we're getting there. And he had that. I need that. I had a marketing background. And he was like, yep, I could use a marketing background, especially social media, because it's not really my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of funny now because I'm also being the face of podcasts and being on there with him. I don't want to be my face out there and also be the one to check the comments.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to create things. I'm happy to be out there. I'm not checking the comments. Somebody else can do that.
Yeah, expand the marketing and messaging team there.
Exactly. It has been very nice to do that. It started out with when we started the podcast initially, the two of us together, I was editing everything and getting it all up there and checking all of that. And now we have people who do that for us. And it's really, really helpful. But it was that, okay, hey, we can do the podcast. I can edit it. We can do all this and kind of get that going.
Did you have to talk Jay into doing a podcast? I'm imagining that he was like initially probably asking for the help with social media, but like maybe podcasting wasn't on his radar. I'm curious how that worked out.
I actually did not have to talk him into it. He probably had to talk me into it more so because he had done a couple episodes previously with someone else. And then he was like, yeah, I did these episodes, but I really want to have this podcast and do it every week.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, okay, well, sure. I've often found myself in life in situations in which I have asked for something or asked for a job. I've not really done many interviews. I think I can count on one hand the number of interviews I've done in my life. It's mainly been me asking for jobs. And part of that, whenever I ask, it always seems like there's something on there that I didn't think about when I asked,
Mm-hmm.
podcast being one of them, that then I go, oh, yeah, I'll do that because I asked for this. But I didn't realize that's what I was asking for.
Right.
So,
I mean, there's something to that, right? They always say that when you decide you're ready for something and you actually finally do it, that you already sat on it too long.
mm-hmm.
And so I think this, like asking for the position before you fully know what's completely involved, but it was a safe ask. It wasn't like he was going to make you do something crazy, but it forced you to learn, grow. Okay, got to figure out how to edit podcasts for a little while until we can hire a team, but it just kind of forced growth, but then also allowing you to expand into a space that you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, not at all. It's all been good. It's just kind of funny how if I look over my life, I can see this pattern repeating. It's like, oh, I ask for something and I don't fully know what's involved. And I'm like, okay, here we go.
That's awesome. Well, as anyone is trying to further narrow their niche, because that's what we hear constantly in the marketplace is like niche down, there's various formulas for like people who this and this. So you have a couple qualifiers to like narrow your niche further. But there's always this fear in the background of excluding other people. I know that you both felt the need, just even going through, like you said, Jay was in his classes and thinking like, this isn't speaking to me. This is all for families. So he knew there was a need, but how scary was it to actually niche down, announce this is who we're speaking to, that's it. Talk to me about that process.
It definitely took a while for me to feel comfortable even talking about it, because when I say I'm a financial planner, some people that I know said, hey, can I come to you? Can I do this? And I just went, so here's the thing. I don't work with families. I'm sorry. It was very, I grew up in South Dakota. There are families abundant there. It was a lot of people back there asking. And I just said, I can't. I'm sorry. Like, this is not who I work with. But I think even more now, I've come to the realization that the more you niche, the better, and the better you can serve your client, because there are so many avenues. And if you know what your client is going through and there are so many clients, like I could just switch the names out, not necessarily their plans as of like what they want to do with their life match it perfectly, but one piece will match this client, another piece will match this client. And I can figure out things a lot easier versus, if you're learning about one particular organization and you have a bunch of clients who are part of that organization, it's a lot easier to learn that because you already know the intricacies of it, versus if you are trying to serve a bunch of different people where you have to learn the intricacies of different organizations. We probably could niche down even further, honestly.
Wow.
We haven't done that because there is such a need, and I think it probably would serve us really well. There are people who, simply works people who live in tiny homes, and that's a niche in of itself. Further you can break things down, you'll realize that there are a lot more people that need your help than you even have time to serve.
Yeah, it's kind of that almost like conundrum. If you're just like, yeah, I'm a planner. Okay, great. Like that's everyone. No one reaches out though, because, they could reach out to anyone who's a planner. So there's nothing that's like almost triggering them to reach out to you specifically because you are the solution. So yeah, the niching conversation is something I'm having constantly with hopeful podcasters, existing podcasters, podcast rebrands in all the ways. And I haven't yet met someone who doesn't need to niche even further. Can you share some of your marketing mind with us? Just a little more about that. Like if someone's struggling in this space and they're hearing like, yeah, I should niche down. I should niche down. Give them some guidance.
One, I think you have to truly have a passion for who you're working with. Otherwise, it's going to be real difficult to do that each day. If you can find an area that you're interested in and enjoy learning about, that can be super, super helpful. Frankly, I'm not that interested in learning about 529s. I'm not. I went into finance because I got married and I was learning that, hey, my wife is in a job that has really good benefits and all of these things. I need help figuring this out. And I couldn't find anybody I was comfortable working with. And so I went into finance to help really figure stuff out on my own. Because if I couldn't find somebody who could give me the answer, I was going to figure the answer out, and whatever that meant. And I think a lot of people who get into finance that I've talked to anyway do have very something similar. They're trying to find an answer. They can't find it. And so they work on figuring that out for themselves, and they're trying to just really get that going. And then they realize they enjoy doing that. That is something you can use to help figure out your niche. Because when I started, I thought I was going to work strictly with airline pilots. And I mean, I absolutely could. But at this point, if I were to do that, I would probably only work with airline pilots from a specific airline, and probably only child-free airline pilots at this point in my life. Like, I don't intend to do that. It's one that I could see myself going down, but it's not a super top of the need. It's, hey, where can you really dig in, figure things out, and just become the expert in that area? That's really what it amounts to is where can you become the expert?
Yeah. And that's a great example of a potential niche for someone. But they have questions around how would I find these customers? How would I market to them? And the marketing to them or reaching them almost becomes easier because they are in a specific place, work for a specific company, in a specific area of the nation, or members of certain groups or whatever. And it almost becomes easier when you niche down.
Yeah.
The marketing piece generally becomes more simplified and specific. There's benefits to that too. Like you're not wasting marketing dollars. You're not blasting Google ads everywhere when nobody's even clicking on them because you could just talk to this one group for free and get clients.
Exactly.
As you started to think, okay, we're going to launch this podcast. It's going to be called Childfree Wealth. Yes, we are going to turn off this certain group of people, but we are going to really lean into this group of people. What were some other thoughts around the brand, the colors, the style, the language? Talk to me a little bit about that process.
It was all very phased, and we didn't try to rush anything either. It was kind of hey, this brand exists, not our favorite. We will redo that. We just had it redone. We had a designer redo it all. The style of it is just us talking. Like it is honestly, there is not a lot of thought other than this is who we are. This is how we act. That to me is a lot easier because otherwise I'd have to put on a persona every time I got onto a podcast. That is not who I am. I mean, you've been out to dinner with me before. Like,
yeah,
I just kind of spit fire on things.
Same person I'm talking to now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not this is how we're going to present. It's just show up and be who you are. And so that really works for me because we are not the people who would do well if we had to put on a persona and go about and do our work. I just know this is how we act in everyday life. I'm probably a little bit goofier in person at times than I necessarily come across. But some of those things weren't big decisions. It was just really be yourself. And I know that's not necessarily the thing that people want to hear because everybody goes, well, who am I? Well, I don't know. You got to do some soul searching on your own for that one.
Right. Well, but I think that answers a big question that's like almost like an undertone in the podcast space right now with everything moving to video and a lot of people adopting video into their process. There's a lot of pressure about suddenly do I have to wear makeup every day? Or does my space have to be perfect? Or do I have to go rent a studio? Or what do I have to do to like exude, I don't know, success enough that like people want to work with me? Like, so there's all of this underlying jabber through that. Some people do think they have to look a certain way. They have to act a certain way. They have to say certain phrases. They have to scream about people in the chat and subscribe and all this stuff. And you're simply saying, just be yourself because people are attracted to you for your values. I really appreciate that. Has there been any other surprises or things that are working that you didn't initially set out to do specifically?
Yeah, I think the interviews also, I didn't realize parasocial relationships are a very real thing. I didn't realize how much that would happen though. And I never thought about that too much because I worked in social media and I was like, yep, parasocial relationships are a thing. You know what the person's putting out. You don't know anything behind that. Like, I didn't realize how much that would necessarily impact me. And the fact that I am somebody who I just am, I just told you I'm working on this hiking challenge right now. Like, for all these things that I don't necessarily talk about on our show. But people will be like, oh my God, I'm so excited to meet you. Like, I've been listening to you forever. And sometimes that kind of goes, oh my. You get that like mental Rolodex of like, oh, what did I say? Like, you've listened to this episode. Okay, I don't remember what I said in that one because that was almost 2 years ago at this point. And like, so that is probably the hardest part is suddenly people are mentioning things and you're like, I forgot all about that.
Like they know you at a level that you forgot was available out there.
Yes, exactly.
I think some people are afraid of that.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more about how you've navigated that. Like, I'm sure there are things that are specifically like off the table that you do not talk about on the podcast.
Mhm.
And what was kind of the thought process there about what you keep private so that you can maintain some level of just privacy? And then what you chose to allow to be public?
I have a spreadsheet. It's called Bri's Boundaries,
I love
and it
it.
is very clearly listed okay to talk about, not okay to talk about. So there are two sides of it, and it'll be like different topic areas and say, I mentioned that I have a wife. I never talk about my wife's name or mention any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Or I say, yeah, I grew up in South Dakota. That's it. It's figuring out what areas you're like, yeah, I just don't need them to look at that. Or I'll talk about things one-on-one with people, but it's not going to be out there publicly available if I haven't talked to you one-on-one before, kind of know you.
Yeah.
It's easier to be a little bit more guarded at the beginning and always open up later than it is to go the other way. You can go the other way, but it's I'm never going to be the person who's out there showing pictures of different things. I love to hike. I love to do all these things, but I don't necessarily ever share, like, location is a big thing that I won't share as far as that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that works because I'm virtual and we all work remotely. That doesn't work if you're in person, and it's just a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
But really, you have to figure out what you're comfortable with and have conversations too. If you're married and have a spouse, like, hey, I'm going to do this podcast. What am I okay talking about? And there'll be times I'll share things from my life. But if it involves my wife at all, I will go and I will talk to her and have a conversation with her and say, like, yes, I can talk about this. Nope, don't talk about that. Different things. So very open, honest communication. I've never made shy of the fact that I grew up in a family who really helped me and my parents put me through college. I had a conversation with my parents and I just said, hey, I'm talking about these things. I really feel like I need to say this because if I'm not saying that and acknowledging the privilege that I do have, then I'm doing a disservice to so many. And my parents were absolutely, yeah, 100% agree. Like, you can't hide that and pretend that you had it harder than you did. I'm like, no, I would never want to. And I don't think that helps.
Mm-hmm.
Having conversations with the people around you is super important. And if you don't want to talk about something, don't talk about it. Or if you record something and you're like, hey, actually, I don't want that in there. If you're recording it with somebody else, ask them if they can cut it out or just scrap the episode. I mean, we've recorded a couple episodes where afterwards I was like, you know what? Not sure I love that. Let's just hold on. And then eventually I'm like, let's just delete it. It's not that big of a deal. We can redo something else. So,
Yeah. That's really helpful because most people listening, I'm just going to venture to say that their brain probably works in spreadsheets because that's me too, and you. So if posting on social media, starting a podcast, starting a YouTube channel, launching your own personal brand, like whatever is on your mind feels scary because there's this perception of exposure there, spreadsheet it out like Bri did. I think that's a great idea. Talk to your spouse, talk to your family, and figure out like what are okay topics, what are not, what do you want to keep private. There are influencers everywhere that on both sides, right? They're the share it all people. You don't have to do that. And then there are the people that have done a great job of making you think that they're sharing it all, but there are definitely some things that they're holding private. So thank you for sharing about that and how to kind of navigate. And it doesn't have to be like risque topics are the only things that we don't talk about, right? It can be anything you want to keep private. If you don't want to publicize that you bought a dog instead of adopting one, okay.
Yeah.
Whatever you want. So has Jay come to you with questions or challenges about like, how do we position this, or what would be the best way to share about this particular topic in the child-free space? Like, have there been challenges there where you've needed to be careful about a topic that you're sharing that is still important to your audience? And how have you worked that out?
Yeah, we have very just open and honest communication. We can pretty much call each other up at any point in time and say anything, and it's not a big thing. He always says, I don't have to ask how you're feeling, you'll just tell me. And that's so true. And having that open and honest ability to just go and have a conversation. And it's not that everybody like knows the levels of our conversations, But it's just, if people saw how open and honest we were with each other, I think they would be like, oh my God, like, it's just so many of these things. People are like, how do you do that? I'm like, I don't know. We just talk. Like, we just talk. That's the level that we're on. And it works for us. Sometimes we talking about, hey, we want to share the story. It might help people. And we'll have a conversation about it. And I can only think of a few times where we haven't been able to be like, oh, yeah, that's comfortable. Most of the time, when we'll share our stories, we anonymize them anyway, because we're not saying like, oh, so and so did this. We'll just be like, hey, we've had people who've gone through the situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not been an issue. I can only think of one time. It was more of like a personal thing. He was like, hey, would it be okay if I talked about this?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, you know what? Let me think about that. And I came back a couple days later and said, you know what? I would rather not. Thank you for asking, but no. And that's what we do. If we have something we want to talk about and we think it could be helpful, but it involves the other person, we just have a conversation with one another. And so it's not
Mm-hmm.
truly, I think so much of our stuff is just communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of the world is missing that.
Yeah, I agree. And it does seem like you two have found this like perfect work relationship of, you kind of can maybe read each other's mind a little bit or just understand various language cues and things. And I think that's what a lot of people are craving in a co-host. And it's not really something that you can say, oh, well, like, look for these qualities, but communication would be a big deal. And I will say, I've even been put in the like middleman position before, where there's these two financial professionals. They've been doing a podcast together as like a joint venture type of thing. And one thinks this way and one thinks that way. And so we need to come together and outline topics that we both agree on, with me being the facilitator. It was challenging because I was looking at these two thinking, how did y'all even come together? Because this doesn't seem to be working.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I want to highlight the piece of allowing your content to ebb and flow, not necessarily sticking to a strict style, sequence, frequency even, which, that could be like a crazy statement in the podcast space. But you have to allow for your personal growth and your decisions on, well, we're going to take a right turn here and we're going this one direction. So have there been any pieces like that where you're like, oh, okay, we're kind of, it's not a pivot because you're still in this child-free space, but anything that has happened there that you've had to navigate?
Yeah, it hasn't been too big of a thing, but we were doing book clubs for about a year. And every month we would read a different book. And we ended that back in May of 2024. So we were going to take a summer break. It's now January of 2025, and we still have not returned to that. And it was like, hey, this was really good. It worked for us at the time. And now it's just not working anymore. We don't have the time for it to even read those books every month like we want to and then talk about it. I'm at the point where if I'm reading a book, I really just want to read a book and enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to read it to feel like I need to get it done and then summarize it, all of these different things. Maybe we'll do a book club here and there, like random things, but it's not a strict thing.
Mm-hmm.
Many times it'll be, oh, hey, I have this idea. I want to talk about it. And then we shoot a message over to the person who coordinates all of our schedule. And we just say, hey, we have this idea. We'd love to talk about it. We're going to record it on this date. Just put it in wherever you think of it. It's like, it's not a big issue. We have our plan, but it's not, it all comes down to communicate. So I have a degree in communications.
Perfect.
And I've learned that so many people are not good communicators. It drives me absolutely bonkers because communication, like good quality communication, really fixes so many issues. And yet so many people struggle with it. For us, it's really just, if you could sum this entire podcast up, it's communicate and communicate well with your co-host, people you work with.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes having a podcast so much easier.
For sure. And even your podcast team, which I want to ask you about. You've alluded a couple times to someone who does your scheduling. Now someone else does the editing and posting, I think. Talk to me about the process of how you guys schedule, how you guys manage this workflow with people in your team, and just give listeners an idea of, a little window into your podcasting flow of how does this work for you guys?
Yeah, we have a asynchronous team, so we have some overlap in our hours, and we have standard calendar blocks. I mean, the calendar blocks, I should know, are really only for client meetings. So it's, hey, these meetings are going to happen at these different times, and then these other times are reserved for either one-on-one. We have, lunch scheduled in for every day, like leave everybody alone, let them eat during the day.
Important.
Yeah. And other than that, it's really just to get your work done and be an adult. We joke about it all the time, but if our compliance and if HR laws would allow it, our manual would just simply be an adult, period. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So get your work done on time. Whenever there's something that we need to record, we try and keep everything recorded about a quarter out in advance. And so usually the person who does our scheduling will say, hey, this has been on the idea list for a while. It's scheduled to go out on this date. Can you guys get this recorded? They'll email either me or Jay, usually me, and then I just pick a time on the calendar. And if it's on the calendar, we have everything color-coded. We use Google Calendar for all of it. And so red is our podcast or press stuff. And it's just, okay, cool. We show up, and often Jay goes, what are we talking about today? And I said, well, this is the topic we were given, so let's go.
Yeah.
That's how it kind of works for us. Somebody else who edits. But at this point in time, all I do anymore is say, okay, I will record that. We record it. And then I say, hey, we recorded it. Good to go.
Hand it off.
And that's it.
That's the dream, I think, for everyone. Because ideally, that's what you want. You want to be able to serve your clients, whether you're in the client service space or if you're doing like client acquisition and sales or whatever you're doing in the business. You need time for your business, not just planning, recording, marketing, posting. It could become a full-time job very quickly. So that's the dream right there.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little more about what was your decision and communication like as far as hiring a team internally to help with the podcast or to outsource? What did that look like for you? Was there a decision matrix spreadsheet involved?
There was not. It was really just, hey, we know somebody who knows this editor who they really like.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Let's give it a try. It's been working out well for us. And then it's, hey, we know somebody who does operations really well. Okay, let's have them work on our scheduling. Awesome. So it's really not for us like any sort of scientific thing. It's just, we know somebody. Are they doing good work? Sure. But so far with our podcast, we've been really lucky to have some good quality people who can manage all that for us.
Referrals are where it's at.
Exactly.
Very good. One more thing. I know you have this Childfree Wealth checkup available. It looks like people could just click a button and sign up on the website.
Yeah.
Tell me, what does that involve and who should be looking into that?
Yeah, we work with anybody who doesn't have kids, not planning on having kids. So if you're there and you're saying, hey, I just need somebody to review my finances, even if you're a financial professional, we've had that and where financial professionals have been like, hey, I don't have kids and I'm not planning on having kids. What am I missing?
Mm-hmm.
You can go to our website, you can schedule it. It's $250. What happens is you pick a time, you pay, and then you'll get an email from one of us. It'll say, hey, here's a financial information form. Please fill it out. Here's a link to our Right Capital, which is our financial planning software, which I'm sure many of the people listening are familiar with.
Sounds very familiar.
Just connect everything, and then we'll go through and we'll kind of give a child-free lens on all of it. And so, when you take your vehicle in to go get serviced, they give you a report that's red, yellow, green. We do the same thing with finances and life. We ask a bunch of questions, and then we'll rank it red, yellow, green, and say like, hey, these are some things to think about. These are questions we've often ran into, or things look really good. So it can be a variety of those different avenues, but it can be for anybody, whether you're a financial professional, whether you're interested in just learning more, and you just really want to get an overview and diagnostic on your finances and your life.
Now, let me ask you kind of like an insider question. Since that is a lead magnet, it is a low dollar, like cheaper option for somebody to just get into your business ecosystem and give you a chance to have a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
Is that the primary call to action on your podcast all the time? Or how did you structure what you'll say on the show versus what's offered on your website? Because I think that's where people get stuck too.
Yeah. We are just very much, you'll see, we always say, make your finances simple so your life can be amazing. So it is a message that is very well repeated throughout everything, because repetition, of course, like, I don't remember what the number is. We have to say so many things so many times for people to actually remember it and understand it.
Yeah.
And, I've met with people who've said, hey, I've been listening to the podcast forever. I did one recently and I asked them the question and they gave me a certain answer. And then I started saying something and they go, yeah, I can hear your voice in my head already from the podcast. It's like, great.
They know.
That's fantastic. It's really not much of a difference between the two, just because you kind of have to repeat that same message over and over again.
Yeah, that's something that I'm often guiding people through, is rather than, on your show saying like, sign up for financial planning, we got to get people just to baby step in, like a simple, free or lower cost option that just allows them to step foot in the door, feel the temperature, see if they like it, and decide if they're going to stay. Otherwise, it feels like a larger ask when you're like, buy my multiple $1,000 thing or sign up for life, right?
Yeah.
That's a little bit different. So I love kind of being able to look at the show, the website, this offer, and be able to see that trail. And I just want to encourage anybody that's listening, consider that when you're designing your show. What is the baby step offer that we can talk about, that we can invite people in? So I love that you did that. I think you've done it so well. So where should people follow you and find you?
You can find us childfreewealth.com or Childfree Wealth on all social medias minus Twitter. You can find podcasts, Childfree Wealth. If you just search Childfree Wealth, you're going to find one of us.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are the top search results for anything when it comes to child-free financial planning, mainly because it's not Googled that often. But that's another question.
Well, it's Googled often for the people who need that.
Yes.
And that's the key.
Exactly. Just child-free financial planning. We're usually on the top there, but it's Childfree Wealth everywhere.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Bri. I love getting a window into kind of like the back end of your business and your podcast. I just appreciate all the advice that you have for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd love to hear which piece of this conversation meant the most to you today. Head to reachingabundance.com/convo. If you're ready to market your business effectively with a podcast, let's talk. Click the book a call link in the description and I'll take it from there. Thanks for listening to Reaching Abundance. I'm Virginia Elder and I'll be back next week with another insightful episode for you. Follow me on Instagram @podcastabundance to stay connected in the meantime.